Growing up, my art was my escape. While other kids ran around outside or played video games, I sat at the kitchen table with a pencil in my hand, sketching the world I wished existed. I didn't talk much, but my sketchbook told every story I couldn't say out loud. And I never cared about fame. I just wanted to be seen. My older brother, Kyle, was the golden child. Good grades, good looks, captain of the basketball team. He didn't draw. He didn't even like art. But what he did like was attention. One night, I was working on a charcoal piece I'd spent weeks refining. A girl crouched on a rooftop under a stormy sky, raw, emotional, full of shadow and tension. I was proud of it. It was the first piece I ever signed in the bottom corner, with my initials, JR. I left it out on the kitchen table to dry. The next morning, it was gone. When I asked Mom if she moved it, she barely looked up from her coffee. "Oh, Kyle took it to school," she said casually. "Said he needed something for his art elective." My stomach dropped. "What? That wasn't his. That was my—" He said. "You didn't mind," she interrupted. "And it's not a big deal, honey. You make tons of these. Tons of these." She said it like I printed them from a machine. Kyle came home that afternoon like nothing happened. I confronted him the second he walked in. "You took my piece. You didn't even ask." He shrugged. "Relax. They just needed an example. It's not like it's a competition." But it was. And 3 weeks later, I found out how far he'd taken it. There was a flyer posted on the school bulletin board. "Congratulations to Kyle Reynolds, winner of the Regional Emerging Arts Talent Scholarship." Below it, a photo of my rooftop girl. Stormy sky, shadowed eyes, my initials cropped out. I stood there frozen as kids around me whispered, "He's so talented. I didn't know he could draw like that." Kyle, that was his? My fingers trembled, because I knew, and so did he. That night at dinner, I waited for him to say something. Anything. But he just passed the potatoes and talked about basketball practice. Mom and Dad were glowing. "Our boy," Dad said. "First place." We always knew he had something special. And when I opened my mouth to say the truth, Kyle looked right at me and smiled. Like a dare. I didn't say a word. Because part of me thought, if I told them, they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they'd believe me and still side with him. Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. He started taking more little sketches from my binder, digital illustrations saved on the shared computer, even a rough concept for a children's book I'd been developing. And every time I tried to speak up, "You're just being dramatic. Why can't you be happy for your brother? They're just drawings, Jessa, just drawings." But to me, they were everything. Then came the email. Kyle had been selected to represent the school in a national teen arts showcase. All expenses paid. Live demonstration. TV interview. My hands shook as I read it over his shoulder. He didn't look guilty. He looked excited, like this was his birthright. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, tears hot against my cheeks, thinking, what do you do when someone steals your voice and the world gives them a microphone? What do you do when your own family cheers for the thief? I didn't have the answer, but I had something else. The truth. And it was time they saw it. The day after Kyle got the email, he walked into the kitchen like he owned the world. "National showcase," he said, holding up his phone. "All the top teen artists. Press, judges, the whole thing." Mom clapped her hands. "Oh, honey, we are so proud." Dad grinned. "That's our boy." And me? I sat there in silence, with a half-finished graphite drawing in front of me, one I'd been pouring my heart into for 2 weeks, and they didn't even look at it. That night, I opened my sketchbooks and flipped through them. Not to sulk, to document every signature, every date, every version of every piece he had taken. I found the original file of the rooftop girl. Tom stamped it. The rough drafts of the children's book characters. Even videos on my phone of me sketching the same line work. Kyle had claimed as his. I wasn't a vengeful person by nature. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And I was done being invisible. The showcase was a week away. And apparently part of the event included a live skills display where artists had to draw or paint something on stage. I knew Kyle couldn't do it. I also knew he'd lie until the very end. But the truth? The truth doesn't need help. It just needs a platform. So I gave it one. I created a private Instagram account. Just for my art. Just for this moment. I uploaded time-lapse videos of me drawing the pieces he'd submitted. I captioned each with quiet precision. Rooftop Girl, drawn 2 weeks before Kyle submitted it. Book concept sketches. Note the initials, digital file screen recording, showing my hand, my style, my creation. I didn't accuse him directly. I didn't even mention his name, but anyone with a brain could connect the dots. I made the account public 2 days before the event. And wait, the next morning, my inbox had exploded. DMs from classmates, comments from strangers, and one email that nearly made me drop my phone. Hi Jessa, I'm one of the showcase coordinators. We'd like to speak with you regarding an anonymous concern submitted about one of our finalists. Are you available to join a brief Zoom call today? My heart pounded. This was it. I clicked yes. The call was awkward at first. 2 women and a man in blazers stared into the camera, trying to stay neutral. We've received some conflicting evidence regarding one of our finalists' portfolios, the man said. I didn't wait for permission. I shared my screen. I showed them the videos, the sketches, the timestamps, the voice recordings of me narrating my process, even a notebook from a year ago with the same characters Kyle had claimed as his new series. By the end of it, the woman on the left was leaning in. You did all this? Yes, I said. And I have never been credited. Not once. They exchanged a look. Thank you, Jessa, the woman said. We appreciate your honesty. An hour later, I got another email. Short. Formal. Kyle Reynolds will still be attending the showcase, but we've amended his presentation format. Thank you for your time. I didn't know what that meant, but I had a feeling. Whatever it was, it would be very public. The day of the showcase, my parents were buzzing around like they were sending Kyle to the Olympics. Smile on stage, honey, Mom said. And try not to mumble this time. Dad adjusted his tie. Remember, this is just the beginning. They didn't even ask if I wanted to come, but I did. Not because I wanted to support him, because I wanted to see what happened when the lies couldn't hold. The venue was downtown, a big auditorium. Lights, judges, media crews. I slipped in the back and sat near the aisle, hidden in a hoodie. They introduced Kyle third. He walked out with that same smug confidence he always wore. And then the host's voice echoed. Kyle will now do a live drawing, replicating the piece titled Rooftop Girl that won him our regional award. His face paled. The entire room watched. The camera zoomed in on his hands. A judge leaned over and whispered something into a mic. And for the first time, Kyle didn't smile. He sat at the easel, picked up the charcoal, looked at the blank canvas, and froze. 10 seconds. 30, a full minute. He drew a shaky line. Then another. He paused, erasing, started over. His hand was trembling. The judges exchanged quiet, disappointed glances. And from the back row I sat completely still, watching the truth undo him. 5 minutes later, he gave up. He stepped away from the easel without a word. No applause. No photo ops? Just silence. The host walked out and cleared his throat awkwardly. Thank you, Kyle. Our next participant? And just like that, the illusion was shattered. That night, I posted one last video to my art account. Just a simple time-lapse of me sketching a new girl, this one standing, head held high, with a canvas in her hand and a storm behind her that she had walked through. The caption read, I don't need a trophy to be an artist. I just needed my name back. We rode home in silence. No one said anything. Not a single word about the showcase. Mom sat in the front seat, stiff as stone, her hands folded over her purse. Dad kept his eyes on the road. And Kyle? He didn't even look at me. Not once. He just stared out the window, jaw tight, like he was the victim. When we got home, Mom headed straight to the kitchen and started boiling water. Dad turned on the news. Kyle went to his room and slammed the door. And I stood there in the hallway, backpack slung over my shoulder, waiting for someone to say it, to ask me what had happened, to admit what they saw with their own eyes. But they did. They pretended like the whole thing didn't happen. At dinner, Mom served spaghetti like she always did after an important day. She handed Kyle his plate and said softly, "We all have off days." I nearly choked on my water. "An off day?" I said, setting my glass down. Her eyes flicked to mine, annoyed. "Yes. It's normal to get nervous on stage." I stared at her. "Is that what we're calling it now? Nervous?" Dad sighed, finally putting down his fork. "Jessa, let's not make this into a thing." "It is a thing," I said, trying to stay calm. "You saw what happened. You all did." Kyle said nothing. I turned to him. "You couldn't even sketch a circle, Kyle." He snapped. "Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wasn't feeling well." "You don't know." "I do know," I said louder now. "Because they asked you to draw my art, and you couldn't." The room went quiet. No clinking of forks, no chewing, just tension so thick I could barely breathe through it. Finally, Mom spoke. "You've always been so dramatic, Jessa. You act like you're the only person in this family who matters." My voice broke before I could stop it. "He never mattered. Not once. Not to you. Not when I was pouring my soul into sketchbooks you never even looked at. Not when Kyle stole them. Not when he stood on stage and pretended he made them." Kyle stood up suddenly, his chair screeching against the tile. "You're just jealous," he spat. "That I actually made something of your stupid little hobby." I stared at him. And I swear, I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt done. "I'm not jealous," I said quietly. "I'm just not invisible anymore." And I walked out. That night, I didn't sleep in my room. I packed a bag, took my sketchbooks, my digital tablet, my favorite pencils, and I texted my aunt, Dad's sister Melanie, the only person in our family who ever asked to see my work. "Me? Can I stay with you for a few days?" "Melanie, of course. My guest room is yours." I left without saying goodbye. No note, no dramatic farewell, just silence. The same silence they'd handed me for years. Melanie greeted me with open arms and hot tea. She didn't ask questions, she just listened. And then she looked at me and said, "You deserve credit, sweetheart. You deserve to take up space." I broke down crying, because no one had ever said that to me before. A few days later, Melanie posted a few of my sketches on her Facebook page, with the caption, "Proud of my niece Jessa. Real talent always rises." The post went semi-viral. Art blogs picked it up, some even linked to my small portfolio site, the one I'd quietly built when I was 14. And one morning, an email popped into my inbox from an independent gallery in Oregon. "We saw your work online. Would you be open to showcasing a few pieces in our fall exhibit?" I blinked at the screen and smiled. I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't plotted to humiliate Kyle, but the truth had done all the work for me. And now it was my turn. Not to hurt anyone, but to rise. The gallery wasn't massive. It didn't have a marble lobby or a celebrity guest list, but it had white walls, warm lighting, and people who actually looked at the art. People who leaned in and read the plaques beneath the frames. People who asked questions about the story behind the brushstrokes. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl sketching in a corner, hoping someone noticed. I was the artist. The gallery owner, Sasha, was warm and blunt in a way I admired. She told me straight up, "Your line work is emotional. It's honest. People feel you in the negative space." And I remember thinking, all those years my parents looked at my sketchbooks like they were just scribbles. And this woman saw emotion in empty space. It felt like someone had finally cracked open the part of me I kept hidden. Sasha put 3 of my pieces in the fall showcase. Rooftop Girl, of course. The one Kyle had stolen first. But this time, her initials were fully signed. Jessa Reynolds. Not JR, not anonymous. Not stolen. When I sent the showcase flyer to my parents, I didn't expect a reply. And I didn't get one. But Melanie came. She stood by my side, tears in her eyes, gripping my hand when someone said, "That's the artist over there. She's incredible." It wasn't just the art that felt healing, it was the recognition, the name, the truth on a wall, in a room full of people who wanted to see it. A few days after the event, Kyle texted me, "Nice art show. Guess you're feeling proud." No apology, no acknowledgement of what he did. Just passive aggression disguised as a check-in. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the truth had already spoken louder than anything I could text back. Around the same time, I got another email, this one from a youth art mentor group in Chicago. They offered me a small grant to run a virtual workshop for teens learning to express themselves through drawing. They'd seen my time-lapse videos, read my story, heard what happened with my brother, and they said something that stuck with me. You didn't just share your art, you reclaimed it, and that's powerful. The workshop started on a Monday evening, 12 girls, all shy, all with sketchbooks held close to their chests, like armor. I told them what I wish someone had told me. Your art matters, even if your family doesn't understand it, even if someone steals it, even if no one claps. I showed them how I build a piece where I start, where I pause, how I leave mistakes in sometimes on purpose. Because art isn't perfect. It's honest. And that makes it powerful. After the session ended, one of the girls messaged me privately. "Thank you for saying I don't need permission to call myself an artist. I never thought I was allowed." I stared at her message for a long time. Because that used to be me. Asking for permission to be what I already was. I decided to do something bold. I created a public art page. This time not anonymous. Not initials. Jessa Reynolds Art.com. It had my full story, my full name, my full portfolio. And on the homepage, one line in bold, "I don't draw to be praised. I draw to be seen." A week later, Kyle messaged me again. This time, it wasn't snide. It was different. "So, people keep tagging me in your posts. I get it. You won. I messed up. You can stop now." I stared at it. The arrogance, the way he reduced years of theft and silence to "you won." As if this had ever been a competition. As if reclaiming what's mine meant I was trying to hurt him. I didn't respond. Not because I was ignoring him, but because I didn't need closure from someone who never saw me clearly in the first place. Melanie told me once, sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the world finally listening to the person they ignore. I think about that a lot. Because I didn't scream. I didn't explode. I just kept drawing. And one day, the world looked up. It was almost surreal, watching my own name appear in places that used to ignore me. A local art blog wrote an article called "The Girl Behind the Rooftop." An arts education nonprofit reposted my time-lapse sketch, calling it "the raw voice of resilience." Even one of my old classmates messaged me out of nowhere. "Jessa, I had no idea that was your work. You deserved that award, not Kyle." I'm so sorry I clapped for him. That part didn't sting as much anymore. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't need their claps anymore. One day, I opened my inbox and found a name I never expected. Mr. Pearson, the high school art teacher. He was one of the judges who originally chose Kyle for the scholarship. "Jessa, I've followed your posts recently, and I owe you an apology. I saw the art but didn't ask enough questions. I let charm and confidence distract me from the actual skill. You deserved that recognition, and I hope you continue sharing your gift with the world." I stared at the message for a long time, and I cried. Not out of pain, out of validation. I started selling prints of my original work through my new site, not to get rich, but to reclaim ownership. The first order came from Oregon, then one from Florida, then New York, and soon I had to order more packaging supplies. Each print came with a small handwritten note from me. Thank you for supporting an artist who once thought her voice didn't matter. Around that time, Melanie and I were eating lunch when she asked something I hadn't considered. Do you think you'll ever talk to your brother again? I paused. I don't know, I said honestly. I think he still sees me as the person I used to be. Quiet, easy to dismiss. Maybe, she said. But people surprise you sometimes. They grow. Or, they pretend to. I laughed. Knowing Kyle? Probably the second one, but a part of me hoped, just a small bruised part, that maybe he had learned something. That night, I got a message from him. Again. But this one was longer. Jess, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught, but for actually believing it was okay to take what wasn't mine. I didn't realize what I stole wasn't just art. It was you. And now that everyone sees you, I finally see you too. For a long time, I didn't know what to say. I reread it 5 times, and then I closed the app. Not out of anger, but because something in me had shifted. I no longer needed his eyes to see me, because I saw myself. I drafted a reply, but I never sent it. Thank you for the apology. I hope you grow, but I'm no longer living in your shadow. I'm standing in my own light now. I deleted the draft, not out of spite, just peace. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at a virtual art summit for young creators. A small panel, nothing huge. But when they introduced me as an artist and advocate for artistic ownership, I smiled because that title, I gave it to myself, and no one could take it. One of the moderators asked, "What would you say to someone who feels invisible?" I didn't even hesitate. Keep creating, even if no one claps, even if someone else takes the credit, because art remembers the hand that made it, even if people forget. And one day, your voice will echo louder than any lie. The chat lit up with hearts, and that's when I knew this wasn't about Kyle anymore. It never really was. It was about me, coming back into focus, line by line, sketch by sketch, truth by truth. A few months passed. The buzz from the showcase faded. So did the family tension, at least on the surface. My parents never spoke of the event again. It was like they tucked it away in some dusty mental drawer labeled things we pretend didn't happen. They kept celebrating Kyle's basketball games, his internships, his achievements. But when it came to me, it was like they didn't know how to celebrate a daughter who didn't need rescuing, just recognition. I went back to visit for Thanksgiving, mostly for Melanie. She insisted on coming too, probably as a buffer, and I agreed. Because even though I wasn't expecting an apology, I was strong enough now to sit in that room and not shrink. Dinner was tense from the moment I walked in. Mom hugged me like she was greeting a guest. Dad gave a firm nod, like I was a neighbor, not his daughter. Kyle barely looked up from his phone, but I didn't let it get to me. I knew who I was now, and nothing they said or didn't say could take that from me. Then, halfway through dinner, Kyle said something that made everyone freeze, so, he muttered, chewing slowly. I saw that Chicago mentorship thing. The one you're doing with young artists. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. What about it? He looked me in the eye, really looked for the first time in months. That's cool, he said. You're doing good stuff. I blinked. It wasn't a full apology, but it wasn't sarcasm either. It was something new. Respect, maybe, even if he didn't know how to say it right. Melanie smiled faintly, cutting her turkey. Dad cleared his throat and changed the subject, but I sat back in my chair and smiled. Because for the first time, my brother didn't speak over me. He didn't try to take my spotlight. He just let me be. Later that night, I helped Melanie pack up leftovers while everyone else dozed in the living room. She handed me a tin of cranberry sauce and said, You're different now. I laughed. In a good way? In the best way, she said. You're not waiting for their approval anymore, and she was right. That night, I didn't wait for them to praise me. I didn't hold my breath, hoping they'd acknowledge my art. I didn't shrink. I just existed. Fully. Unapologetically. A few weeks later, I got invited to display my work in a real city exhibit, a joint showcase for rising artists across the Midwest. The organizer called my rooftop girl an iconic image of artistic reclamation. I nearly laughed when I read that, because not long ago that same girl was tucked inside a sketchbook, hidden in a drawer, dismissed by my own mother as just a drawing. Now, she was being printed on a flyer, with my name, Jessa Reynolds, in bold letters beneath it. The night of the exhibit, I wore black slacks, a gray turtleneck, and a necklace my aunt gave me. People walked past my section, pausing. Some leaned in. Others asked me questions like, what inspired this character? What does the stormy background represent? How do you choose your focal point? And I answered each one without hesitation. Because this was mine. My work. My vision. My voice. Near the end of the night, a girl no older than 16 came up to me. She was clutching a small sketchpad to her chest. Hi, she whispered, barely above a whisper. I just wanted to say, I read your story. I used to hide my drawings too, but now I don't. Tears burned behind my eyes. I leaned closer. I used to hide mine too, I said. But you don't have to anymore. The world needs what you make, she smiled. Thank you. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It wasn't even about reclaiming stolen credit. It was about becoming the artist I was always meant to be, becoming someone other artists could look to, becoming seen, without begging, without shrinking, without being stolen. Winter settled in, and so did a new kind of peace. Not the kind where everything's perfect, but the kind where you know who you are, even when others still try to act like they don't. My inbox was full of invitations from small galleries and independent zines, people who really saw the work, not just the lines and shading, but the message behind it. One zine wrote a feature titled The Art They Tried to Steal, but Couldn't Silence. And I thought, yeah, that's me now. Not silent, not invisible, not the quiet sister, just Jessa. At some point, Dad called me, not for an apology, just to ask how I was doing. I could hear the discomfort in his voice, like he wanted to say more, but didn't know where to begin. We talked about the weather, then about a neighbor's dog, then awkwardly, about the exhibit. I saw the photos, he said. Looked professional. I held the phone and smiled faintly. That's because it was. He cleared his throat. Well, keep it up. That was the most praise I'd gotten from him in years. And weirdly, I wasn't bitter. I just didn't need it anymore. A few days later, I got a letter. Like an actual envelope. No sender. Inside was a folded piece of paper, in Kyle's handwriting. It read, I don't expect a response. But I wanted to tell you I applied to a digital arts program. For me, not to take anything. Because watching you find your voice made me realize I never had one. I copied yours because I didn't know how to make my own. I'm sorry. For everything. I hope I get to tell you that in person someday. I sat with it for a while. Folded it. Unfolded it. Read it again. And for the first time since everything happened, I believed him. He wasn't trying to fix things overnight. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was just telling the truth. And that meant something. I didn't write back. But I did send him something. A blank sketchbook. On the inside cover, I wrote, Find your own rooftop. Draw your way there. Nothing else. No name. No lecture. Just the space he never gave me. That spring, I held my first small solo exhibit, 10 pieces. One room, a few dozen guests. But it felt like standing on a stage I had built myself. Each piece had a placard beside it, and at the front of the gallery was a sign that said to every artist told their voice was too quiet. "The world hears you now," some cried. Some stayed for hours, just studying the work. And one girl, barely 11 years old, walked right up to me and asked, "Did you really get your art stolen?" I nodded gently. "I did." "What did you do?" I smiled. "I made more." After the show, a local college reached out. They offered me a small role teaching a digital art class over the summer, just a beginner workshop, but it felt huge. I accepted. And when I told Melanie, she shouted so loud on the phone I had to pull it away from my ear. "You better believe I'm showing up to that first class with a Jessa shirt on." Meanwhile, my parents stayed distant, still stiff on the phone, still not saying the things I used to wish they would. But that was okay, because I had stopped needing their applause. My art no longer lived in the back of a closet. It lived on walls, in galleries, in young artist hands, in frames, in print, in me. And Kai, well, I saw on his Instagram that he'd started drawing again. Different style, simple, but his. And one post caught my eye. A rough sketch of a boy standing beneath a billboard that read, "Some lessons are loud, but some echo quietly forever." No hashtags, no taglines, just that. And for the first time, I left a comment. Just one emoji. Like saying, "I hear you." Summer came fast. The days grew warmer, and so did my confidence. Every morning before my summer art class, I'd sit at the edge of the campus lawn with my sketchbook open and a coffee in hand. No pressure, no competition, just the sound of birds and pages turning. And every so often, I'd catch someone watching me. Another student, usually, just quietly taking in the moment. Maybe wondering how someone could look so peaceful while holding a pencil. If only they knew. The peace didn't come from the pencil. It came from finally being seen. The first day of my class, I stood in front of a room full of hopeful eyes. 19 students, ages ranging from 16 to 25, all clutching their tablets or sketchbooks like lifelines. I took a deep breath and said, "This isn't about making something perfect. This is about making something honest. Whatever lives in your head and heart, put it down, even if no one understands it yet. One day, they will." That was something I wished someone had told me. So I gave it to them. One afternoon, after class, a girl named Ava stayed behind. She was shy, with big round glasses and charcoal smudges on her hands. "I really like your rooftop girl," she said. "She looks strong, like she's been through stuff." I smiled. "She has." "Is she you?" Ava asked. I paused. She was. But now she's for everyone who's ever been silenced. Ava looked at her shoes. "My sister used to tell me my drawings were weird, so I stopped showing anyone." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small sketch pad. Flipping to a blank page, I handed it to her. "Draw something weird," I said. "Draw it just for you." She smiled, slowly, nervously, but she nodded, and I watched her walk out the door with her shoulders just a little higher. Later that week, I got a surprise visitor during class. Melanie. She popped her head in the door during break and waved like a kid at a parade. I laughed and walked over. "You came." "Told you I would," she said, grinning. "I'm your biggest fan. Still waiting on that free-framed print, though." "Check your porch next week," I teased. She looked over at the students. "You're doing something good here, Jess." I nodded. "Feels good, too." Then she lowered her voice. "You know your mom's been asking about your website." Quietly, of course. I blinked. "She what?" She said she showed it to one of her coworkers. Bragged a little. "Called you our artist." I raised an eyebrow. "She really said that?" Melanie nodded. "Don't hold your breath for an apology." But it's something I realized then. I didn't need her to say sorry to know I'd proved her wrong. I'd built something they never could take back. That fall, I launched a mentorship program of my own. line by line. A free digital platform where young artists could submit sketches, receive feedback, and connect with real mentors, people who knew what it was like to be overlooked. I partnered with art teachers, small galleries, online communities. And within weeks, the first 100 students had signed up. It wasn't just about teaching anymore. It was about passing the light forward. Around the same time, I received an email from the same National Award Committee that once honored Kyle with my stolen work. They said they were starting a new initiative focused on artistic integrity, and they wanted me to be one of the keynote speakers at their next award ceremony. I read it twice, then once more, and then I laughed out loud. Not out of bitterness, but out of irony. I said yes. The night of the ceremony, I stood behind a podium in front of hundreds of students, teachers, judges, and artists. The room was full. The lights were warm. The mic was mine. I took a deep breath and began. A few years ago, someone else stood on this stage with my work in their hands, and you applauded. But that wasn't your fault, because I hadn't found my voice yet. I hadn't learned that when people try to silence you, you can still speak, with pencils, with brushes, with line, with shadow. Today, I'm not here to reclaim an award. I'm here to reclaim truth, and to tell every young artist in this room, you don't have to fight to exist. You already do. The room was silent. Then, a single clap. Then more. Then, a standing ovation. I didn't cry. Not then. I waited until I got home. That night, I hung my nameplate from the podium on my bedroom wall, next to Rooftop Girl, next to the article clipping, next to a framed comment from a student that read, "Your class made me brave." And then, I opened a new sketchbook. On the first page, in clean, quiet ink, I wrote, "This time, no one's stealing this." And I signed my name in full.